thumbs up. Stand for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty, welcome everyone. Alice, may you do a roll call, please?
Yes. Alderman Petracos?
Here.
Alderman Capitona?
Here.
Alderman Gillogly?
Here.
Alderman Smith?
Here.
Alderman Deskin?
Here.
Alderman Vandermeer?
Here.
Alderman Ferretta?
Here.
Alderwoman Barbison?
Here.
A present, Mayor.
All righty. Let's see what's going on. Went to ICSC 2 weeks ago. It was good. It's nice to actually have conversations now with the brokers and the retailers, much different than what it was 2 years ago with the economic development that's going on, whether it's housing starts, whether it's just being out there and they know who we are and the business parks popping. We're having conversations that are good. I mean, they're actually, the brokers at Lockport Square are negotiating right now with an anchor. It's a good anchor. I think everybody be very happy. Hopefully they can work out a deal up there. There's some smaller things, not just in Lockport Square, but in some of the other places too that are close to getting some leases signed. So it was good. I think we're definitely seeing the momentum, which is, it's very nice to see happen. What else is going on? A lot of little things in downtown. I've got some possibilities for some mixed-use development that I'm working with people. But this stuff always happens. I'm always talking to folks, but they're definitely, there's a different temperature out there. People are getting excited about it. So I've got a couple meetings with people coming down on Friday, show them some available properties and such. So we'll keep plugging away. I was working with, you guys remember Art Space a while back? You guys may not remember, but talking with Chevron, I've been working on them for that 20 acres on the south end of the business park. It's a 220-acre park, the remitted land. I've been working with them for that bottom 20 acres to see if we could work something out, because I would like to get a larger parking lot put in for the Heritage Village and for kind of how I see future things going on down there. I know that the Midwest Soaring people who we've given a lease to over at the train station really want to do a lot of events over there. They like that space. So having, you know, Chevron is willing to work with us on that property, that's good. They also were talking to them about the building down there. If you guys ever seen, there's an old pole barn down there. About maybe possibly donating that. And I brought some of the folks from the Artist Guild over there. We're looking at possibly utilizing that as an art space, collective work. It really brings some new energy down there, which would be fun. And right now the building does nothing. Anyways, just talk. We're always, there's a ton of other things going on that as they actually come to fruition or closer to fruition, I'll talk about. But also we started getting information back from Army Corps of Engineers for the whether this pipeline easement is possible or not. They're getting their feedback. But Ben, I was going to mention to you that the feedback that we have gotten, if we can get that posted on the website so everybody can read it, make an easy link, just tell Ryan to put some kind of obvious link on there to that information. I want to make sure everybody's able to see it as it comes up. Like I've always said, I want an open conversation. I've asked put together a public outreach, a public information meeting specifically for this, so we're working on getting that done as well, so we can have the big conversation as we move forward. So that's most of the stuff with what's going on my end. Anybody want to talk about any liaison stuff that they've got? Start anywhere you want.
Yeah, I do. On Monday, Ben and I met with two engineers from H.R. Green and a representative of Engineered Rail Solutions in regards to the quiet zone study. We looked at all the various intersections in town. There was I had some concerns about 10th and Commerce for no other reason that I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, 25 years ago, there were some kids that were killed in an auto accident at that intersection. I brought that to the attention of Engineer Rail Solutions. We may need to go ahead and do some things with the alley of Commerce Street. So what we're going to do is speak with the owner of the property, the Paradise, whoever owned the Paradise Bay parking lot, which is going to lead to, when we get to the council meeting, I'm going to ask to table that, just so we have a conversation with that landowner at that time. So, but we have looked at the preliminary ideas regarding the quiet zone and all the various intersections, and we'll be moving along.
Okay, yeah, we've been trying to get the price so that, like I said, with this pipeline thing, I don't want to pay a dime for it. If these guys are willing to pay for it, I'll consider it, as long as it meets all the other standards. But that's why we've been getting this together, so we can get an actual price for what this would cost and what it would cost them to put it in. All right, thanks, Darren. Anything else? All right.
Yeah, for planning and zoning liaison, we just met with Pam and Amy. Meet, talk to Joe Finley and Ben, and kind of come up with a plan to streamline the development process, the engineers, in-house reviews, how we're doing everything, and all the way from A to Z, all the way down to certificates of occupancy and everything. So
Okay, good.
it was a good meeting and moving forward. So expect something pretty soon.
Right on. Thank you. Anything else?
I just have an update.
Yep.
On last meeting, I had announced it on October 13th, Jody Mariano from Principal Urban, well, Tesco and Associates was going to go out and take a look at all our main corridors on how we're going to dress them up and get ideas. And she did do that with her associates, and they made an on-site visit and documented and measured all of the site areas. And they're inputting the information into the systems this week, so that we should have something for us to review next week. On October 29th, we have an appointment scheduled with Jody. Time hasn't been addressed yet, but October 29th, we should have an idea what their plans are, and and the different things that we could have put into our main corridors to dress them up. So.
All right, I appreciate that. Thanks, Joanne. Very good. Anything else? Good for now? All right. Let's move on. Jump down to Pam. What do you got for PZ1?
Yes, thank you. ML Realty, who's the developer of Heritage Crossing Corporate Center, is seeking final development plan approval for building number 7. As you may recall, the preliminary plan for this development was approved back in 2008. The master plan shows a total of 12 buildings to be constructed out there when all is said and done, to the tune of about 2.6 million square feet. There are 3 buildings currently existing out there. Building number 7 will be number 4. It's generally located on the west side of the corporate center, near the southwest corner of 147th Street and Gauger Road. It'll be constructed on a 19.21 acre lot. The building itself will be 363,224 square feet. Typical of what you see out there, there'll be truck docks and there will be trailer parking. The proposed building will be constructed of the same type of precast concrete material that you currently see established out there. Landscaping will be consistent. And they will have naturalized plantings around the detention area again, as what has been the consistent practice out there. This went to the Plan Commission on October 13th. No one from the public was present to testify. Tim Geisler was present to respond to any questions or concerns that were brought up by the Commission. After the discussion was completed by a vote of 6-0, the Plan and Zoning Commission did recommend in favor of the proposal, subject to conditions which you have in your staff report. So at this time, staff is just seeking direction from the council to place this on the November 4th City Council agenda for action. And Tim is here this evening if you need any questions or concerns that you need him to respond to.
Did you have any plans to speak, Tim, or?
I didn't here to answer questions.
Okay. What do you got? Questions, concerns, gripes?
None here.
Not
All right.
really.
It looks like a great thing. I was talking to Tim a little bit. you know, there's definitely interest in the buildings. It's not just all spec stuff, so that's good. All right.
I was speaking with Tim earlier this evening, and we discussed the final layer of asphalt on Gauger and 147th Street. We're getting closer.
Oh, yeah, you know what, Ben, can you, I know this isn't you, Tim, but can you just give us an update on the streets over there and the openings and all that kind of stuff?
Sure.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
in the
thank you,
realm
Mayor. So right now, the developer, ML, will be completing the resurfacing of 147th. Gauger Road, as you know, has already been pretty much completed for some time now. We do have an agreement with the county that has us keeping the roads closed on the south portion in regards to acquiring some right-of-way on the north of 143rd. We're looking to potentially change that agreement a little bit, so we can hopefully, now that these roads will be completed by this winter, that we might be able to get these roads opened back up fully, and it might involve some other documents with the county that we'll bring for your approval. But it's great that the developer's meeting their end of the agreement and going ahead and finishing the resurfacing now while they've had the opportunity with good weather, and so it's really a matter of just jurisdictional authority between the city and the county that we need to play out.
And where are we at with, what is it, 151st Street? That one was closed, or is it 147th?
Yeah, there's actually two closings. One is, technically it's 147th to Gauger, and
Yeah.
then it's also where 147th meets Lamont Road, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So 151st, yeah, excuse me.
Okay. Now, I know we had some work going on there. Can you bring me up to speed too with where that is?
Well, just that the developer's doing that, you know, east-west road. They've already completed Gauger, and so as soon as he's
Okay.
done with the final coat, which will probably be Monday, that road's pretty much ready to be opened.
Okay, so that's, it's not the road through the park, it's actually.
You're not guaranteeing access to 147th yet from 151st?
No,
Once
'cause-
this is built, I mean, we still can be held back on that?
That's something we need to work out with the county at this point.
Yeah, we're trying to, it's just a never-ending battle, but I think we're getting
I
close.
think we've got an idea. We'll bring into your future meetings an agreement.
Second meeting of November?
Let's hope.
Yeah, let's try. Okay, thanks.
Actually, if I can, while Tim's up here, we had a concern, we were talking about, you know, we're cleaning up all our arteries and everything, and we sent them some information about cleaning up our main artery, which is 355, and, because there's a lot of naturalized detention ponds that he has there, and they're kind of just right up against IDOT's fence there, so we met out there, talked to him, and he's just like, yeah, it's a no-brainer to, everything that's naturalized, keep it naturalized, but it speaks to the public when you kind of cut a couple rows there in front, so it looks like it's manicured. Somebody has been there, and it's cleaning up that fence, so he's been working on that, so thank you.
All right, right on. Yeah, we'll put it on for, are we okay with the consent? Put it on for a consent item.
First week in November or second?
Is
Or, I'm sorry.
there a reason we can't do it the first meeting?
First week? Okay.
Our next meeting?
November 4th.
Mucho grazie. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
All right, what else you got, Pam?
The next item is Interplan on behalf of Heartland Dental is seeking approval of a final development plan for lot number 8 in the Creekside Center. And it's the lot that's next to the existing KFC and Taco Bell. It's the last lot in that particular development to be developed. As you know, it's a mixed-use development right now. It's located on the northwest corner of 159th Street and Edelman Road. The preliminary plans for that development were approved back in 2005. Heartland Dental is proposing a 3,600 square foot building with associated parking. The elevations comply with the city's design and development material requirements. There also will be incorporating a red brick, which if you notice, this is what is predominant in that development, so it'll be complementary. The landscaping complies with the city's requirements, and as a matter of fact, we worked with them and actually provided them with the KFC and the Taco Bell plan so that the plantings, the types and the design are going to be very uniform and again, complement the overall development. This went to the Plan and Zoning Commission on October 13th. Jay Schoenman, on behalf of Interplan, was in attendance to answer any questions or concerns that the committee may have had. There really weren't many. When the discussion was completed, the Plan Commission, by a vote of 6-0, recommended in favor of the proposal, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report, and staff is seeking direction to place this on the November 4th City Council for action.
All right. Concerns, questions?
No.
All good? Yeah, let's put it on the consent agenda, please. All righty. Easy enough. Ben, what do you got?
Thank you, Mayor. The next item on your agenda, CA1, is really, part of it is for just informational purposes, and the second part is a resolution number 15081 to surplus out some equipment for copiers that the city has at City Hall. So we've had a contract that was coming due at the end of the year, and staff, Jody Herman and Ryan Colalis, did a nice job getting some estimates and proposals from companies to do a comparison, and ended up selecting Konica Minolta as a new service provider for copiers throughout the city. There's a nice savings with that. We're going to save about $300 a month, and we're getting all new equipment with new capabilities. You know, there's no color copying really at City Hall right now. We always have to run down to the CDC. So we actually got some nice equipment savings out of that deal. So, and I was actually just talking to Jim Petrakos about another item, and he just brought it up and said, hey, we should bring that to the council and just show them that staff is being proactive and that, you know, they are looking at contracts and things and finding ways to save money and finding efficiencies in how we run even things as simple as copiers. So trying to be good stewards of the tax dollars. So, so the memo is just kind of for your information, and then there is a resolution on there. We'll be seeking your authority to put that on a council in November 4th to basically surplus the old copier that we had and get rid of it.
Okay, so that's the action you need?
Yes, sir.
Any problems with that?
I was reading the contract. How long was that contract for?
42 months, so
Yeah.
it's
Does seem like a long time for a contract.
actually the one we had before that was longer, 60 months. So it just depends. I mean, there's obviously cost savings and sometimes going longer. For us, it felt like a good happy medium between what technology comes out with copiers versus what our current needs are. We felt this copier was pretty much up to date and has all the capabilities that we need now, so a little bit longer was a better cost savings for us. We could have gone shorter and realized a softer savings, but this one seemed to be right in the mean of what we were trying to achieve. The good news, too, on this one is that typically, again, the other contract was still valid until the end of the year, where the new vendor covered the cost to break that fee. So there was no transitional cost to the city to make this change, so that was a positive
90
thing.
days to break the old contract.
Something
or
like that, yeah.
Yeah, so I just thought, it seemed like a long time for me, but maybe not for
Yeah, it's
commercial
pretty
use.
standard, 36 to 60 months. It's almost like buying a car.
Good, good.
When you get to be Brian's age, you got to think, you know,
Yeah.
short term. Yeah. All right, man.
There you go.
I'm good. You guys okay with the consent on that action? Okay.
Thank you. The next item on your agenda, Mayor and Council, CA2. This is actually an older item that we resurfaced after talking to Alderman Peretta about a few sidewalk programs in town. Back in 2012, the 50/50 sidewalk program was being discussed, and I've included in your packet some of the old minutes that were discussed, just for your edification. And really, what it is a matter of appropriations. I mean, we had a discussion. We can certainly have one. Right now, we have a sidewalk program that replaces old deteriorating sidewalks. The budget does fund that to about $80,000 to $100,000 a year. Amy, you can jump in anytime if you want. And so the debate is, I think everyone is open to having a 50/50 program for the community to take advantage of. But it's a matter of, do we allocate some funds and take away from the other replacement program that we're doing, or do we go ahead and make the request a little larger from the budget, add another $20,000, $25,000 a year, and earmark that just for this? So for an example, if we have $100,000 in the budget right now for sidewalk replacements, I think $80,000 of that is earmarked for replacing old sidewalks, and $20,000 I think is for meeting ADA requirements. So we could make that budget line item $120,000 and then have another $20,000 available each year as a 50/50 match program, first come, first serve, and when that's used up, it's used up. If no one takes advantage of that opportunity, we can either A, make a decision by a certain time period at the end of the year that the engineer can use it for other sidewalks, or it just rolls over into reserves at the end of each year. So that's kind of my question to the council is, I think there's been a history from a past council. Does this new council want to affirm having a 50/50 program to the residents? If so, how would you like us to fund it? I mean, $20,000 more of the budget, multi-million-dollar budget isn't going to strain the CIP or anything. It's just a matter of how would you like us to proceed?
Well, let me ask you a question. And Amy, maybe this is better for you to answer. When the 50/50 program is, somebody has a sidewalk, they're not happy with it in front of their house, probably because it's deteriorated in some fashion, but it's not going to get fixed anytime soon? I mean, what is that?
No, the current sidewalk program that we have for replacing existing sidewalk is 100%. And we really can't change that because if we decide not to replace sidewalk where there's a trip hazard or it's deteriorated and then somebody falls, then we could have a liability issue.
I'm perfectly fine, no, I agree with
We're
that.
not really planning on changing that at all. Back in 2012, there was a separate program that was discussed, and actually I think the city council approved it verbally, for a 50/50 program for installing new sidewalks in areas where there was no sidewalk existing.
New sidewalks, sorry.
All right, I got it.
And-
So like when I walk down, what is it, Hamilton Street, there's a couple yards that just have no sidewalk. So it would be something like that. If those people wanted a sidewalk, they,
Yeah.
and are willing to pay half,
Yes. The program that we discussed in 2012 had a couple of different stipulations. It couldn't just be installing sidewalk right in front of somebody's house with no termini. It could be filling in a gap, like if there was sidewalk on the whole block except for in front of one resident's house and they wanted the sidewalk there, then they could request the new sidewalk and pay 50%, and the city would pay the other 50% to install that sidewalk and connect the gap. If there was no sidewalk on the entire block, and every single resident along that entire block agreed to pay their 50% and agreed that they wanted sidewalk, then it could be used for that. But if there was 3 residents on the block that said they wanted sidewalk and the rest of them said, no way, we're not gonna pay for it, and it was just gonna be a sidewalk to nowhere, then it wouldn't qualify.
okay, no, I get it. So then let me ask you this question. In the places where there are currently gaps, like there's a couple on Hamilton Street, is it in our plan to actually fill those in one day, or are we always going to leave them in?
We have been filling those in if we have a reconstruction project where we're reconstructing the road and there's like mostly sidewalks along, but there's a few gaps, then we've been adding that into the reconstruction project. So residents could look on the CIP and say, well, I'm not going to pay for 50% of it because in 2 years our road's getting reconstructed and it'll probably get done for free then. But in some of the areas in newer neighborhoods where there's gaps, like Thunder Hill, we're not planning on reconstructing those roads for the next foreseeable future. So there's no program or there's no funding in place to fill in those gaps.
Well, Bob, it sounds like this is something you brought up. Do you find that people in Thunder Hill would be willing to do that? Do they want?
Yeah, and I also asked Amy to research other gaps, throughout the city. And I observed over years, actually, and especially this summer, individuals will be walking on the sidewalk and they have to go on the street because of the gaps in the sidewalk. And not only adults, but also children, they will go on the street and it creates a danger. And especially this summer, I did a lot of walking myself.
Bob and his
my
Fitbit, yeah.
subdivision. And speaking of which, I walked Summit from 159th all the way to Division Street, and I'm hoping to get that sidewalk put in from Briggs connecting all the way to CVS. But that's a separate issue right there. What I don't understand is some residents, they saw me walking in the grass, and you would think they would stop and say, hey, did your car break down? Can I give you a lift?
I thought they would say, get off my lawn.
Yeah. I didn't get any of that. But no, it was by design. I'm getting off on a tangent. But there's areas where sidewalks, there's gaps, and I observed many residents going into the street and actually cars whipping around the corner, and there's trees, and you really can't see the residents until the last second that they're actually on the street. So that's why I brought this forward. I remember we talked about it in the past. I think it'll be important to put a funding mechanism to fill in some of these gaps. And I do have a resident that is interested in participating in the 50/50 program. That'll be one lot that will be filled in, connecting the sidewalk together. So one additional area where it'll be safer for the residents to walk.
I mean, I personally don't have a problem with it, but I wouldn't want to take money out of what we're already funding to do these 100%. If we decide that we want to add a little bit more money, if people are willing to do a 50/50, that's fine. But I wouldn't want to take out from existing money for our responsibilities.
Yeah, and I really don't think that we can at this point. This year in particular, we had a huge response to our sidewalk replacement program, and we actually overspent the budget, I think, a little bit. The sidewalk replacement program is very important. If you look at, we actually have lawsuit pending for somebody that had, tripped on a sidewalk. So, we have to be very cognitive of the sidewalk replacement request, and we have to make sure that we're taking care of as many of those as we can during the summer.
No, and it's looking good watching the sidewalks going around town, so I don't want to interrupt that.
So this is something that not only residents could take advantage of, just be aware that, if we have a policy in place for this, a homeowners association could put money towards this to help, fund a part of the sidewalks where maybe the developer's MIA or something like that. And it's just going to be on a first come, first served basis. We'll right now in the budget, we have $120,000 earmarked, $100,000 for a replacement program and $20,000 for ADA, I believe. And so we are doing a budget presentation later tonight, and so we already have our first correction. We'll be adding that if council deems it something you want to do. We'll add another $20,000 into the budget, in the next kind of for the budget hearing or whatever. But if that's what I'm hearing.
Is 20,000 a reasonable number? Is that something that you think we could use, or it's a little too much, or I mean, what?
I think it's a reasonable number.
Do you?
We could get a good size gap along a property, like one property or a couple of smaller properties
Okay.
in a year with $20,000. So.
Okay. Like the mayor said, I think we have. I'm sorry, but yeah, sorry. I like the mayor said, I think we have enough sidewalks that really do need repairs. So I definitely don't want to short that program.
Right.
So
How many feet of sidewalk approximately does that give us then?
Was it like
I think it was, what,
1,700?
It's like
somewhere around there.
$7
I
a
think
square
it was
foot,
like
isn't it?
1,700 feet of sidewalk that we could do for $20,000.
That's great.
Is there any overwhelming reason why there's gaps in sidewalks in newer subdivisions?
Yeah, that's,
I mean, I'm not to ask the
When-
obvious
that was-
question here, but
This goes back to the process you were talking about with planning. When we brought this up, what's happening now is Ben and the rest of the staff, whenever we have a new subdivision, they're basically telling the developer, hey, we don't want a scenario with some of the subdivisions that we have now where the subdivision is not complete and there's gaps in sidewalks. So they've been working with the new subdivision, say, hey, here's the deal, you're gonna fill in those gaps, before you stop construction if we run into that scenario. So this brought up an important point. How do we get to this point? And I think it's improving the process going forward with the new subdivisions.
There's a lot of annexation agreements that the document was just silent about that thing, so we don't have necessarily an enforcement arm to do that. A lot of the developers may not want to put the sidewalks in because when they come back, if they're active, they're getting active again, they're going to be constructing a home in there, and this is an impediment maybe in their process, or they run their equipment over and scratch it all up and have to replace it anyway. But for some, they may want to do that or have access to that lot from another side, so it makes some sense. I just wanted to bring it up that it's more than
So
just
this is-
residents.
empty lots that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Anywhere where
Who's
there's
got
no-
owners, what owner is gonna wanna have an empty lot and put a sidewalk in?
they don't all have to be empty either, though.
Yeah,
Well,
s-
that's
just
what
just the ones that touch it need to be in agreement to do it and pay for it, 50%.
But the reasons we don't have sidewalks is because somebody hasn't built a house there.
Right.
In most
I think in
connections,
Bob's case, the resident that he is talking about that has a lot that is willing to put the 50% in, he does have an empty lot that has not built on, but because he bought an extra lot with his property and there's no sidewalk on the lot where
And
he's
right
not
now-
planning on building a house.
Oh, okay.
So right
he's buying
now,
a
he's not
larger
gonna
lot.
pay to put a sidewalk in, and we can't really force him to, but if there's a 50/50 program, we both might be able to help the community out by sharing that cost and burden.
It sounds like the 50/50 needs to be more, though, proactive on our part. It seems like the homeowner who has a gap in front of his house doesn't really care that he has a gap in front of his house. So I think we need to go to that homeowner and says, there are people who are concerned that would like you to fill this gap in, especially in the older parts of town. I don't know if we could approach them and say, would you be willing, we feel like this is a $500 project, would you be willing, you've been called out or something, I don't want to say called out, but I think but we need to approach these people and say, there's other people concerned that there's a gap here, because if they don't have one there now, they really don't care, probably.
And there are other options out there for filling in the gaps, specifically when these residential areas are in the close proximity to a school, an elementary school. There's safe routes to school funding out there that's available for filling in these gaps, and that's exactly what we used in Kelvin Grove last year to construct all the new sidewalk that we put in Health Grove, and that was a 100% grant. We didn't have to pay anything for that other than the engineering. So there's grant possibilities out there for some of these areas to fill in. It's just, you know, there's a couple of locations around town, a few locations around town where they don't really fit into those categories, and, you know, they're not gonna be reconstructed in the next couple of years. They don't qualify for state route to school, or safe routes to school grants, you know, but they may have residents that are willing to put up the 50% to fill in those gaps, and that's what this program would be for.
Having an adopted policy gives Amy the tools and staff, you know, just a vehicle to administer these types of funds. Otherwise, we might have a good case being made by just a resident, and we may decide that's a good idea and do it, but then you're kind of picking and choosing favors, right? Where this is a first come, first serve, it's a shared cost. As long as you give us the money in advance and we contract it out to have it done, it seems like a no-brainer.
It's by no means gonna take care of all the gaps in the
No,
city.
no.
I mean, first of all, there's not enough money, you know, budgeted to do all of the gaps in the city, and, you know, it's just not gonna be feasible. There are gonna be people out there that aren't gonna care and that aren't gonna have the money to pay the 50%, so,
And
you know.
it is a means to make an effort, right? And I think it will make some improvements in the town, so.
But I think that was a good point, and I think furthering upon that, maybe people's knowledge of this program, too, they're not gonna have knowledge. So maybe with the water bills, maybe that's something that we could put on,
Community awareness, absolutely.
just so people are aware of it, so people that do wanna or are able to take advantage of it know about it to be able to do that.
We could create a flyer too, and if there's certain areas that the council members see, or code enforcement or staff, that this is something, ooh, we really should do something here, we could put a flyer on their door and let them be fully aware of what the projects are available.
Be a good idea.
All right,
For all new projects, we're all, like Sagebrook, are they gonna put in all the sidewalks before they build homes?
Before they build the homes?
Well, I mean, are we still having those gaps, or are we?
Well, I mean, there'll be gaps until the house is, I mean, I think where the concern happens is, and this happened in a lot of communities, you had subdivisions that started, and then the economy tanked, and then those lots sat vacant, the developer walked away, and now what do you do in that particular situation? Maybe I'm wrong, but that's really what it was a common practice in a lot of municipalities. It's just not unique to Lockport. But, I mean, when development is going, I mean, our requirements before they get occupancy is that all the improvements need to be in unless it's a certain time of the year when they can't be put in. Then they post a bond for that, and then if they want their bond money back, those things need to be taken care of. So as long as the subdivisions are active and moving forward, there shouldn't be an issue with that. It's because of the economy, when a lot of the developments fall apart, that we started to see some of that kind of activity.
But in case of Thunder Hill, is there something that we're doing on these new ones to say that the owner has a lot, there's nothing, the annexation agreements were quiet about that? Are we moving forward and doing newer things and newer developments to change that?
Yeah, that's what you're on, man.
Yeah,
I'm asking if I have to be on it, or is this something that's already covered?
Yeah, and maybe we include the price of sidewalks for
think
the whole
like
subdivision in the bond.
the
That's what I was-
resident that has
So
to-
if,
Should we change
and I
that?
understand the way developers work is, I mean, they don't wanna put sidewalks in before a house is built,
Makes sense.
because if they do build there, that gets ripped up when the trucks and everything go
But
in.
it should
But if
be,
we
yeah,
include that in the bond, if the developer does go under, then we have the money there to pull on to do
Yes,
it.
and that's another very valid point. I mean, a public sidewalk is covered under the letter of credit as a public improvement. So if a development goes under, you know, and we have the letter of credit, we could pull that and install the sidewalk. If we lose the letter of credit and the development goes under, then, you know, then that's a different story. But if there's letter of credit money to be had and the public sidewalk can be put in, I mean, it should be put in.
So as I was reading this, I just had two things, and I think one was probably covered, but I didn't see it. Does it somewhere in here specifically exclude like new development, right? So Sagebrook couldn't come and say, okay, give me 50%. I think that's the intent, but I didn't see it in here, right? So is there wording within the ordinance that would preclude
I'd
that?
have to go back and look. I don't think it was really an ordinance that was passed. I think it was just a policy.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it said existing,
I get what you're
you know, residents and stuff. I don't know if it was that specific, but you're right. It probably should be tightened up a little bit if we're
And
gonna
I think
actually
that's what we
fund
all
it.
intend,
I think
right?
we
But I
would
just
administer it that way, I mean,
It'd be smart.
But-
Sagebrook would come in and be
Exactly.
like, pay for
Well,
half my.
You could say you'd administer it, right? But if I'm a builder, I'd be like, hey, give me my 50, it's up to 20 grand or whatever. But, and then the second one is, you know, it called for an don't remember exactly the wording, but a reasonable termini or something, you know, along those lines. But it feels like maybe we should define that a little bit more, right? And I didn't know that Thunder Hill was like a specific example. So when I was thinking about it, just like, well, if you're going down the street and there's 5 openings, even if it's just every other one individual could say, well, this is a reasonable termini because I have sidewalk on both sides.
Yes.
But still, somebody wants to walk down the street, they have to 4 different times go into the street. Is it really valid then? Or do we say an entire street? Or I don't know how to put that into code, but it just,
But I would think
Something-
that would be reasonable. If there was sidewalk on both sides and the resident in between wanted to pay the 50%, I would think that would be. Or if all of the residents on the block wanted to put in their 50% and create a whole block.
all I totally agree with.
Where I
One-
wouldn't say would be reasonable would be if a homeowner lived in the middle of the block and their 2 neighbors wanted to put in 50%, but nobody else on the street would, and there would only be sidewalk in front of those 2 houses, then you don't have a reasonable termini, you know.
That's
You
the
got
same
2 open
discussion we
ends.
had for, was it Tandem? I was putting a sidewalk, everyone kept saying,
Yeah,
it's a
exactly,
sidewalk going to
exactly.
nowhere.
Yeah.
But the intent is you fill in sidewalks wherever you can, and Amy had a good reason, she can get other funding to do that sidewalk later, so we receive the cash instead of that. So that makes sense, but everyone's always trying to get funds and create more walking paths and more sidewalks to places, so we should look at places wherever we can to put in where it makes sense.
I think having Amy and the engineer's discretion on termini is fine, not necessarily being overly specified, but I think maybe adding this language about not available to new development, I mean, we'll add that language.
Yeah, good call. All right, anything else? We could talk about numbers during the budget, I suppose. Sounds like 20,000 is a reasonable number, but if we need to talk about it more, we could talk about it then. Okay. Can we pass an ordinance to make sure teenagers use the sidewalk and don't walk down the middle of the street? Yep. All right, let's move on. Ben, what do you got for
Mayor
Granicus?
and members of council, the next item on your agenda is about Granicus for Video and Document Services, CA3. Granicus is a purveyor of video and document technology to many municipalities. We actually talked to them originally when we changed our website with the city and going with Civic Plus. Civic Plus offered a free document center with their website hosting fee, so we were taking advantage of that for some time now. But that system is a little limited in how it can be changed and varied. Granicus has a lot more options to it, and one of the neat features with it, I had some experience with it at a prior employer and municipality where when you go online to click on the documents or the video to watch the history of council meetings, you can actually have those documents sync with the video. So if you click on the memo for 50/50 sidewalk program, it will automatically take you to that part of the video on your website so that you don't have to go search for that information, and vice versa. So it's a very nice feature. It does have some expense with it, some capital expense up front. We are planning to use some existing budget funds this year to buy some of this equipment. We would need to get a laptop for Alice to be able to do some indexing during the meeting so that the video knows where to sync with those documents, and hopefully she can achieve all that without being too annoyed with that task. If not, we'll have City Attorney Tom.
Alice this is the first time Alice is hearing
But, so there's a little cost up front in getting some equipment to do this. There's servers on our server platforms, and there's a service with that, about $8,000 a year that we have put in the budget request for 2016. So we think spreading this out over two fiscal periods makes some sense. We should get a better, hopefully, image. We paid for an upgraded system to have true HD, so we hope the video quality will be better and the audio should be better, and just the functionality of it should be a more easier way to be transparent for our residents on what's occurring during these meetings.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's very clear that, especially looking out here tonight, although I know there's a playoff game, most people like to, go to the meetings and watch them online at their leisure. Right now, we do have a few hiccups. I know I've heard plenty of complaints about sound quality. So when Ben looked into this for me, I think this is a good program. I know there's cost involved, but it's really, truly the best way, I think, to get information out to residents so they can follow along. And it really is cool when you click on an item and the video syncs to it. It's very, very helpful, so.
I can send the council a link on what it would look like, too, if you want to check out other municipalities that have this program. And it should work with our website and Civic Plus has worked with Granicus and other communities, so it should be seamless.
Do you want to, well, go ahead, I'm sure
Jinxing
there's some
myself
questions,
there,
yeah.
all right, Jim.
Should be, that
Should be
part.
seamless.
Does it delay anything in terms of when the video gets posted?
No, that would still
it's
all
an
be
extra
managed
3
with,
days?
nah, it's all with staff, and LCTV provides the video the next day, and all that's just, it's just staff utilizing different types of equipment, so it's
So
not.
if LCTV puts it up the next day, Granicus has it up the same time?
Yeah, actually,
Sort of.
our staff deals with Granicus software, so it's still we're still achieving the actual uploading of all these things. It's just they're hosting the data, and the video player is not YouTube. It's an actual, copyrighted player that works well. So.
Could you, I read it briefly, but I just don't remember the contract. What's the length of the contract on this?
Yeah, the contract length, I think, is, I apologize, I don't remember how long it was.
I guess I just can't.
You can always give each other cancellation. One of the things that I wanted to follow up with them, and I haven't yet, is if there's a investment in this equipment, if we do cancel, let's say a year into it, is there some kind of money or funds that we would get back for the equipment that's still operating, or is it always ours? So I can look into that for you.
Yeah, if the equipment is out of technology-wise, I mean, do we have to pay for new, or how does it work? And
Yeah, I mean, it's.
looks like the training's pretty specific. If you don't make their training, they still charge you. It looks like they're pretty on the ball as far as.
Yeah, well,
Picking up
we
payments
schedule that
and-
with staff, so hopefully
Yeah.
we would make it. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a 3-year agreement right now, but
Okay.
you can, either party could opt out of it with proper notice, I think 90 days, so.
Are there any other
30-day
communities
notice.
nearby that use this?
Say that again?
Any other communities use this?
Joliet is
Joliet
on it,
does?
is the big one, if you want to go to Joliet's website and the
Yeah, that's the
clerk's
best thing to
office.
do. Go to, check out one of their city council
Yeah.
meetings online, and you'll see exactly how it works.
Yeah, it's something I actually looked into when I first started here. It was just an additional expense that I didn't think we needed at the moment, and we were spending money redeveloping the website, and so I just held off and knew that we would probably get back to it at some point.
That does bring up a good question. After 3 years, if we say stop, what
Yeah.
happens to all that content?
Sure.
Do we still have access to it?
Yeah, we still own it. It's they actually have dual servers, and it's been, it's available in cyberspace forever by contract, but.
You have to take it then and put it back on YouTube type of thing?
No,
or
no.
It still can go through the
It's still
Granicus?
player, is just software, yeah. We own the software.
All right, well, why don't, sounds like before we make a decision on it, let's let everybody have an opportunity if they want to go check
Yeah.
it out.
Sure.
Like I said, the best place to go is City of Joliet's website. You can see how it works. Okay.
Now, I'll get to the vendor and find out about what do we do with equipment or video content if cancellation or end of contract.
All right. The Fraulein.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a discussion of the fiscal year 2016 budget. We started with finance preparing the budget, then the department heads all reviewed the budget. We met with the council members one-on-one or 2x2s or however it is that was convenient to them. And they had line item budgets, so they really had all the details and were able to sink in. So I thank all of them for engaging, and we had some really good extended meetings that I thought were important for this process. So even though this whole presentation is an overview, there was really a detailed discussion that occurred. The detailed budget is on our website. It was posted out there earlier this week, so if anybody wants to see the actual details, they can feel free to go and do that. There were a few changes that I just want to point out from the time that I've met with each of you that have been made to the budget. One was a employee that was put in the budget to go from part-time to a full-time. That was removed out from the budget. We added $25,000 to the budget for an economic development consultant and $20,000 to the police department budget for Westcom. The chief went to a budget meeting with Westcom, and our costs are increasing for the dispatch services. So we wanted to go ahead and get that put into the budget. This shows a summary by fund of all of our the funds that we have, showing that general fund, the MFT fund, TIF, capital projects, water and sewer improvement fund. Those were using excess reserves. So those reserves had been accumulated over time, and when we passed the CIP, we adjusted, knowing that we were going to be using some of those excess reserves to be able to fund our capital projects. So you can see the 2nd year of drawdowns of those reserves coming out to about $4.4 million of a drawdown, but you'll see in that last column, I'm showing you what the unrestricted fund balance. So that's not all of our fund balance, that's just what's unrestricted. We still have a healthy $15 million out there in unrestricted between all of those different funds. General fund, so this is just specific to the general fund itself. Property taxes make up the largest share of our general fund revenues at 40% of our revenues. But still, that's only 9 or 10% of a resident's tax bill. So even though they may get a tax bill of, $2,000 or $3,000, only 10% of that really belongs to the city's portion. On top of that, we have sales tax of 21% and state income tax of 16%. On the other side is the expenses and how the expenses are broken down, and you can see that the police department makes up 50% of the city's budget for the general fund, followed by public works and engineering at 16%. So as I indicated, we had a planned drawdown of excess reserves. So you'll see $2 million being transferred from the general fund to the capital fund. And then you'll see also that coming in as revenue on the capital projects fund. This still leaves us with a general fund balance of 6 months. Our policy states that we need to keep a 4-month reserve. So we still have an extra 2 months of reserve sitting out there. So we didn't transfer everything out this year, which means that we could still transfer again in 2017 to help fund some projects then. One of the things I did want to point out is that income tax revenue, we put in for a 15% reduction because the state is talking about taking those funds from us. So they have been saying, or initially it was a 50% reduction. We're not anticipating that that's actually going to happen, but I wanted to put a placeholder in there so that we weren't spending down in our general fund all of the money if, in fact, that does happen. Property taxes, we're going to talk about that at the next council meeting when I present the levy to you, so I'm not going to get into too much on property taxes today. And the other item I wanted to point out is the police pension, which is only 60% funded. The expense that's inside your budget there it comes from the actuary. We have an actuary that reviews that and comes up with what we need to be able to continually fund our pension plan. What we'd like is to have some additional buy down. If there are extra funds within the police department in line items that they don't spend through 2016, the city council would like to use those funds to be able to commit towards buying down and continuing to fund that police pension. So we're hoping that we'll be able to achieve additional monies to be able to be spent there. With that being said, this year's budget is $200,000 more than what we budgeted last year. Okay, according to the actuary, that's what we need to be able to continually fund that plan. Oh, really? Okay. Ben, you want to take it from here?
Thank you, Lisa. The next slide you have here is just some bricks and mortar consultants and events. Just want to go over a few of these things. The facade grant program is still in here at 50/50. It's a $40,000 investment in the budget. Code compliance grant has been increased from $40,000 to $60,000. That's the sprinkler and alarm system grants. We have some additional chamber renovations scheduled for about $20,000 to hopefully add some additional seating here for staff so I can get everybody up at the dais here with all of you. The consultants, we talked about the economic development consultant. We threw a little extra money in, the $25,000 increase. The development engineer consultant that we've talked about, we've had a meeting with Amy and Pam and Jim, and we're continuing to hammer out that new process for you, and we'll bring that to you for your approval. The mayor had talked about a potential additional economic development consultant, whether we partner with the retail coach again or whether we find another firm like that to partner in our retail recruitment. I mean, I think the community is feeling a little underserved still with retail and restaurant opportunities, and we want to continue to put some emphasis on that. We have some legal fees in there. We're outsourcing prosecutions now with the court in this room a couple days a month. And we wanted to have some money available for possible litigation. We don't have anything pending or concerned, but I think it's important to budget a few legal dollars for that. Each year we have the events that the city participates in with either actual contributions or staff time and public works, Central Square activities, the Mayor's Walkport Art Series, Summer Art Series, and then of course Canal Days. Other general fund impacts that were budgeted last year that are still in there to highlight is the community marketing is still at $48,000 a year at this time. We are still partnering with Central Square for this building at $80,000. There's no change in that this year. Those are the $10,000 more a year for Granicus that will be put in, and potentially the $20,000 more for sidewalks if we decide to do that. Do you have a way to click? Oh.
Yeah, I do. Okay. So some of the smaller funds that we have, the motor fuel fund, we're going to draw down $153,000 from that fund for capital projects. That's what we use as our local match to the federal grants. So we also use it for snow, that money for ice control, for salt. The bond sinking fund, that pays the debt of the city. You can see we still have three bonds outstanding. 2012 Alternative Revenue Bond, which will have its final payment in January of 2020. 2013 General Obligation Bond, which will have its final payment in January of 2017. And a 2015 General Obligation, the one we took out this year, will have its final payment in December of 2018. The Garbage Fund, those are the garbage operations that are provided by Waste Management. We bill through our garbage bill for that, and they have a small increase each November. That contract actually ends in October of 2018. The TIF fund, you'll see that what we put out there in expenses are just a placeholder. We don't intend to spend the money here in the TIF unless we have some fantastic project that is facing us, because there aren't enough revenues in there at this point to be able to do much with the TIF. But if we do have a project, at least we can hire a consultant or two and be able to engage into that conversation. The Water and Sewer Fund. So the revenue for the Water and Sewer Fund, 88% of it comes from user fees, and then the rest comes from tap-on fees and some other miscellaneous income. The expense, 64% of the expense in the Water and Sewer comes from operational expenses and 36% for capital funds. One of the things that we want to do this year is to consolidate the capital fund for the water and sewer and the regular operating account. There's really no reason to keep them separate. We end up having to just make a lot of accounting transfers back and forth, so we're going to move to consolidate those together. We've already talked with the auditors, and they're on board. They don't see any issues with that. So you'll see in the water and sewer fund, because we have those two funds separate, we have $520,000 that's being transferred from the operating fund to the capital fund. They still have a loan that's outstanding from 2008 that they have with the general fund, so we have a payment plan where $125,000 every year gets paid for that. On top of that, the capital fund is going to draw down an extra $561,000 for capital projects, of which they have $5 million budgeted for projects in the water and sewer fund, and approximately $1.4 million in debt payments. There's 2 IEPA loans that we're paying on, and a portion of the 2012 Alternative Revenue Bond. Okay, now for employees. So, we like to update this to show you guys where we're at with FTEs. So we've converted our employees into FTEs, and you'll see for this year, it actually went down a little bit from last year, so we're at 102.8. We have no new hires anticipated into 2016, and the reason why we have a decrease is we had somebody who was a full-time employee that we replaced when she left with a part-time employee. We're still 11% below our height in staffing in 2009, so I think that we've been holding firm on this area.
We did also talk about in the 2x2 meetings with the council members about some succession planning, particularly in public works and in the treatment plant operations. And at some point, there's one person that probably needs to be 2 people. So at some point, we might anticipate bringing in one more staff level at that point, but we'll have those discussions for a future date.
Payroll breakdown. So in the general fund itself, I just wanted to show you where are our costs at. 63% of the expenses in the general fund are for payroll and related costs. I looked at neighboring municipalities just to see where we were at compared to where other towns were at, and just surrounding us, we had another municipality at 65%, and 69%, 73%, and 83%. So I think this is a good place for us to be in, and we are really good about maintaining those, those staffing levels. So, it's nice to be able to say that in our surrounding areas, we really do have the lowest staffing costs, both, in dollar-wise plus in volume-wise. So, also, there's a graph on there showing you what percentage each department is of the payroll, and the police has 46% of the payroll. And Public Works, Engineering, Water, Sewer, that's another 37%. Capital projects. Okay, so capital projects are funded by non-home rule sales tax, the new electric excise tax that was passed, annexation road impact fees, the telecom utility tax, grants, contributions, and transfers from the general fund. These are the equipment purchases that were put into the budget. We had $200,000 in the police department. They have 5 squad cars, 2 of them coming from capital and 3 coming from their federal seizure money. They have a Ford Taurus for the investigator, that's coming out of federal seizure money, and a pickup truck for a community service officer. So we didn't talk about this publicly, but we had an officer who retired from the city and went to go work to with the school district. He was our school liaison officer, but he was funded partially by the school. So we didn't have funds for us to hire a new officer. So what we're looking to do is hire community service officers as part-time, and they're gonna need a pickup truck to be able to do that. The street department had $106,000 put in, of which $76,000 pertains to the equipment for the snowplow. We purchased the actual truck in 2015 and told you guys that we would put the equipment on in 2016, so you see that there. They're asking for another pickup truck as part of their equipment replacement program. And the sewer department has 2 influent pumps and a lift station pump in there. So not a whole lot in equipment purchases, which I think is, we're replacing what we need to, but we're not being excessive in our equipment replacement. Capital projects, road projects, $9.1 million, and water sewer projects, $4.3 million. So we're pretty excited to be able to share with you what these are. I'm hoping you guys can read this. There's a lot of projects on here again. The first line just shows you some carryover, and again, this is a slide that probably before we come back and meet again in November, I'm gonna meet with Amy and we're gonna update some of these numbers, again, based on projects that are carrying over from this year, and what's gonna happen and finish up by the end of this year versus what needs to carry over. So we have a placeholder for some of those projects. And then we can go down the line with some of those projects if you guys want. Briggs and Division and Farrell. Bob, that was the project you were looking for, the multi-use path. You'll see that's funded mostly, or with some of it from grant funds. The Division and Gauger signalization also with grant funds. The Highlands lift station, that's from the developer. So those are, top priority for us because we either have matching funds or a developer that's paying for those. And then some of the street reconstructions, 17th and Hamilton, Cleveland 11th. We have the 2015 bridge maintenance, which you guys approved in this fiscal year, but we said it wasn't gonna happen until 2016. The second phase of the Beamy Street main replacement, Briggs Street water main, iron removal facility that we thought we were gonna do this year, but got pushed back when well 9 collapsed. So we're planning on doing that next year. Of course, some money in there for seal and patch and sidewalks. Porter Plaza storm sewer upsizing. Well 15 construction, so we do have funds in there for us to drill for a new well. That's not the treatment facilities, but we have the funds at least to drill for the new well to make sure that our water supply is still accurate for all the development that we have going on here. We have a 17th and Lawrence storm sewer. The sewer lining that we thought we were going to be able to finish in 2015 pretty much all got carried over to 2016. We have Commerce and Division Street resurfacing. The city's portion of the IDOT project, we have to make our payment in 2016 for that. And then there's a couple other smaller ones. The last line being the quiet zone. So that you'll see revenue booked for $2.5 million and an expense for $2.5 million because we're not going to do that project unless we have funding for it. So our next steps are posting in the newspaper on Monday that we're going to have a public hearing. Our next council meeting will actually be the public hearing, so we'll start out with looking for public comment, seeing if there's any type of feedback from residents on that. And then we'll present also the levy at the next council meeting, and then we're looking for the approval of the budget at the November 18th meeting. So, any questions?
Will the people have to be present in order to make comments on, for the public hearing, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, how else would you suggest they do it?
Well, no, I'm just wondering if people can, either email and ask their questions that way, or...
Well, they can always email me. That's not a problem. I mean, I don't discourage the residents for contacting us, but if they want to be heard by the public in front of all of the council, absolutely, they would need to come here to do that. But I will address any individual questions with them if they just want a private discussion, absolutely.
Take calls like a radio show.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, it's just, some people just don't come to the meetings, but yet they do have concerns, and, how else would they be able to contact and ask those questions, so.
Well, there'll always be people who contact you directly, and then you can bring their questions here too, of course.
They can certainly email any of their aldermen in their ward their questions, and you guys can bring them up at the next meeting too, so, or at the hearing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then we'll push it on
Thanks,
to you.
Lisa. Appreciate it.
I had a few comments. One is, I think that this budget was really well prepared, and one thing you mentioned that I didn't see what was posted online, but one thing as I'm looking through, Lisa projected out a couple of years, which I think is really helpful in the way to look at it. But their labeled budget, just for the public, if anybody's looking at, that's not what we're voting on now. We're only voting on a 2016 budget. So that's just a point of clarification. I think it's a really good way to do financial planning, but it's not what we're voting on within the next couple of weeks. Lisa and I spent, almost 3 hours on her holiday, which I appreciate going through this. I think it's really good. There are a couple of things that I have, some of them minor, some of them maybe not quite as minor. But my main thing is really on capital and how we're going to do capital. There are a couple of things on that list that either weren't in the CIP or haven't been voted on, and I just feel like we've got the CIP, and we should use that as our nexus for getting capital projects done, right? Obviously, we can't anticipate everything, right? If some sinkhole comes on State Street, we're going to prioritize that. But I still think it should go through, well, actually, that's probably not even our responsibility. But, I still think it should go through the guise of the CIP. I understand all the capital projects, why we have them on there. But, specifically the Commerce Street, that's one that hadn't been brought in front of the council before. Again, if we talk about it as part of the CIP, maybe we prioritize it and we do it, that's fine. And then also that quiet zone. And I know that's a little bit different because we might get outside funding for it. That being said, that funding spends the same as resident taxpayer funding. We put together a prioritized list, and we've talked about the quiet zone a few times. I don't think anybody would say we don't want the quiet zone. But every time we've talked about it before, it's been said, either we can't afford it, or it's too expensive, or it's just not prioritized. So I get that we would get outside funding to do it, but I still think the outside funding should be used in the priority that we determined, and maybe we should revisit that priority, and maybe quiet zone becomes it. But I think it should go through a process instead of just being thrown into the budget. And Ben spent a lot of time with me on the phone yesterday. I sent a litany of questions. The only one I think that's kind of still outstanding that is very minor, but just seems unnecessary to me is the funding for the new chairs in here. It's a couple $1,000. It doesn't even make it to the presentation. But I sit in chairs all day. These seem fine. Again, it's taxpayer dollar.
I'm good with these chairs.
It doesn't seem necessary to me. I would like to personally see that taken out. But again, that's really minor, but don't see the need for that with taxpayer dollars. So, but other than that, I've gotten a couple calls. I've talked to a few people. I think this was a really well prepared and well balanced and thought out budget.
Yeah, Lisa gets all the credit for that. She did a great job.
No, all the department heads, really, we all work together.
Yeah. I still don't understand the chair thing. I didn't know what there was anything wrong with them, but I think we should all stand, actually, burn more calories. Yeah, I mean, I just, as far as those other two things, though, and I when it came to Commerce Street and the quiet zone, Commerce Street, I'll address this way, is as the IDOT tear-up wasn't really something that became something of an opportunity after the CIP was kind of put in place. When IDOT agreed to really tear out State Street, we kind of had to, it's a big project. So it's like, okay, how do we work within this to make sure that we keep businesses, alive during this thing? We had talked extensively about redoing the Hamilton Street parking lot to help that neck of the woods, but we ended up just foregoing that project in the end because we couldn't get the one property owner to get on board with it. So that project was not in the CIP, but it was really meant to respond to a big project that was coming up. The Commerce Street then is taking care of the businesses on the other side of the street. And if there's a way that we can clean that up to help make it more viable for those folks to survive through what's going to be a very disruptive time. So that was one of those opportunity things. And you're right, Jason. I think just throwing it on there is maybe not the right way to do it, to talk through it a little bit better.
Yeah, and just to follow up my point on that, I don't disagree, right? I mean, honestly, I didn't even know Commerce Street was an official city street, right? I thought it was just like an alley. So I'm not saying it can't be done, but again, we tell residents to go look at the CIP and what's going to happen. I just think it should get prioritized on there, especially if somebody thinks something's going to get done this year and due to timing or budget or for whatever reason it's going to get pushed, and then they see Commerce Street is done, it just could lead to questions. So I just think it should be put into that process.
The city has an allocation for resurfacing each year, and we do different target things, and Amy prioritizes on how she needs to do that. Commerce Street was going to be added to that, but we thought we would keep it separate and point this all out to you for the debate. Division, the part of Division was actually one of my requests. There's a section after you make the turn from State to Division and you get new asphalt over the bridge, and then it really crumbles and looks terrible as it makes the turn around to this new attraction that's coming with the haunted house. So I thought it'd be good to kind of finish paving that paveway to this new destination. We'll have hopefully thousands of visitors. So that was a kind of an administrative request of beautification in response to development, and I think the mayor and I had talked about Commerce Alley as being a response to, hopefully, for business retention, beautification, and response to the IDOT project. So that's the only reason they were really added in. They're about $130,000, $140,000 a piece to do that asphalting, and so yeah, those are actually called out separately than just kind of sneaking them into the resurfacing project, because we didn't want to take away from what was already being planned for the community in regards to resurfacing in the capital plan. So Amy, I don't know if you want to talk about any kind of priorities. I think the priority in those is really just a matter of timing to get them done before they're impacted by additional use by either IDOT's disruption in 2017 or the haunted house launching in 2016. You know, I like to see them still in there, but certainly whatever the council wants to do is fine.
And then as far as the quiet zone goes, I mean, like I said, the only reason that's even come up at all was because the possibility of somebody completely pay for it. And I've been very clear with Ben. I'm like, I don't want to pay a dime for this. So if it happens, it doesn't take out of our capital project. Whether it confuses people and things like, why did we end up paying for a quiet zone? That just has to end up coming from an explanation. It's like, we didn't pay for it. Now, that brings together to something that for me, I think is the larger question, is making sure that we can effectively manage these projects. You know, one of the things, I mean, as we go through this capital improvement plan, we did a lot of work, tremendous amount of work that was done. And, you know, what worked, what didn't work, you know, we have to look at this and see are the things we can adjust to make it work smoother. I think one thing that the original CIP didn't do well was really kind of look at unknowns. And, you know, I live in an old house, and anybody knows when you open up a wall in a 100-year-old house, you're going to find things that, well, you thought it was a $2,000 project, it ends up being a $3,000 project. When it came to roads, we had an extra $3 million worth of surprises. And so that is something that I think as we look towards the CIP as we move forward is putting a little more contingency. Do we need to move 2 projects to 2017 to allow for contingencies? Are we able to effectively manage it? We're talking about getting a developmental engineer, which I think is a good move. That frees Amy up to look more and be on the spot more with the CIP project. So we might be able to help manage some of them better. And also, you know, I'm sure we've all gotten feedback from residents too about like overlapping projects. Now, I get that you're never, it doesn't matter, man. It's amazing. They complain if you fix the roads. They complain if you don't fix the roads, right? So that's going to happen. I get it. But it doesn't mean that we can't be as effective as possible. So counting on the fact that maybe there's overruns before we start another project, I think to me that's the larger question. is looking at the CIP, and I was gonna sit down with Amy this week, we'll try to do it, next week, where we can kind of talk through that a little bit more, about how we effectively move forward with managing the CIP. So,
We could certainly move either Commerce Street or Division, you know, one of those into 2016, one into 2017 to balance that out, and let Amy, you know, help us figure out when's the best time to do it. We wanted to bring them up just because of some timing concerns, but is one more suited than the other? They're both in kind of a 16 timeline, in my opinion, but absolutely, we can try to spread those out and get those into conversations with engineering to kind of into the fold of the CIP.
And, you know, obviously there's 7, 8 other votes up here. My point was more process-wise, not that I'm 100% against Commerce or Division or anything like that. You know, if we decide to go with it, we decide to go with it. The only thing I'll add on the quiet zone, I think you've been very clear, we're not doing it unless we get the funding for it. My point is probably a little bit broader, that even if we got funding for the project that's doing it, it doesn't necessarily have to go to a quiet zone. I think it should go to whatever we prioritize. And when we, at least previously, when we discussed the quiet zone, again, with only residential and, you know, existing tax base, it wasn't a priority. So maybe we look at reprioritizing it, but I also don't think it has to happen that way either, right? It could go towards the next 2 projects on the CIP, whatever.
I don't want to get into that, but that's a different discussion. I mean, you're off on that. I mean, if you're going to say to this person who wants to put a pipeline in, this is why we're doing it, you can't take the money and just put it off into an account.
And that's what I'm saying, that we shouldn't say this is why.
I mean, but let's approach that when it happens. I mean,
wait, so let me understand what you're saying. Are you suggesting, Jason, that, like, let's say this quiet zone ends up being, after H.R. Green's done with it, they say it's going to be $3.2 million. And we tell Dupree, look, if this is going to get approved, $3 million is coming to us so that we can do this. Is your suggestion that, like, well, once that money's there, maybe we should think differently about it?
I'm not saying once the money's there, I'm saying right now we should think differently about it, right?
I think if I can,
Quiet zone's
Because for me, the quiet zone is about 2 things. I agree with some of the concerns on the west side that, you know, this pipeline affects the west side. So therefore, what can we do to make it more beneficial for the west side? So that's specifically why. I'm not put, like, you're right, it's like I want $3.5 million, but I'm going to spend it anywhere I want. I want to spend it very specifically for the west side because they're the ones that get affected by it. So that's why I've always focused on it for that, not just for capital improvement in general. I think it's fair to the residents over there, and it helps. And that's kind of where, whether it's Sandy or other people that come in here and say, look, I live on the west side, this is going to affect us. It's like, well, what if I told you we can get all those train horns? That's the most calls I get from people on the west side, is the train horns. I've never known how to fix the problem until maybe now. So that's always been the kind of dialogue I've had with those folks, is like, look, if we could take care of the train horns, how would you feel about a pipeline easement going through there? So to not do that, I think would be very wrong.
So the 2 people that did come to speak against the pipeline, though, both said, not to put words in their mouth, I think I heard them say that's not a trade-off that they would make.
Yeah, but that's Sandy, man. Yeah, honest to God, I love Sandy, but that's Sandy. And so that's why we're going to have a community, that's why I want Dupree to have a community meeting where, we reach out to the west side, get in this room, and let's hear it, man. And so whether we hear the positives or the negatives. And then, of course, there's this whole problem, with always kind of silent majorities. And I saw this when we were at the IML conference. We were talking to a mayor downstate who was like, they had a garbage dump, issue. And it was like, the 3 vocal people that had this huge problem with it, when they went out and they did a survey, turned out they were the 3 people with the problem. Everybody else was fine with what was going on. So it's like, you got to balance that a little bit with maybe Sandy doesn't want it, but that's Sandy, So, but then again, I don't want to ram something down people's throats either. So that's why I want to have a community outreach meeting with it. And if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. I'm not married to this pipeline by any means, man.
Yeah, no, I get that. But so if the quiet zone is 3.2, right, and I know we're in negotiations on, or maybe we're not even there yet, but if we get to the point where Dupree says, we'll give you 2.5, does that just mean we just don't even consider it then? I mean,
so in other words, if the price tag is 3.2 5, and they only want to give us 2.5.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it. I'm not paying a flipping dime for this frickin' quiet zone. That's what I told them. That's my stance on it. Maybe council thinks differently, but I'm not paying a dime for it. If they want to come here, what benefit do we get from it, other than that, if they want to pay for something like this?
If I could just interrupt, I think what he's trying to say is, this is a business opportunity for the community to have this development, and if they only negotiate for 2 million and we need 3 million, do you take the 2 million and use it for other streets, or do we do an emergency water connection with another community? Do you put in a new well? I mean, this is certainly under the purview of the council to decide. Tom and I can negotiate with the developer and get as much as we can. If it's 2 million or 3 million, you can decide to use it for the quiet zone or anything you want if you earmark it for capital. I think the mayor's suggestion is that we're using this a little bit as part of the reasoning to accept the oil pipeline for the West Side residents, that the quiet zones would benefit them the most.
Yeah.
And I think that makes some sense, right? But I think Jason is just introducing the idea that you don't necessarily have to use that capital contribution towards quiet zone, but I believe it's kind of been pitched that way so far.
And the reason why, and Mayor, you've been consistent, right, with this is going to have to pay for the quiet zone or I'm not doing it, right? And that's an admirable stance. It's the way you're looking at it, that's fine. But the thing that I can't reconcile in my head is when we talked about the quiet zone in the CIP, whatever it would have been then, right? I don't think we were saying 3 million. I think we were thinking 2 or 2.5 for some reason. We said, hey, you know what? That's not a priority to us, right? So yes, this is a different funding mechanism, but it's the same or more dollars, right? And if at 2 to 2.5 million, it wasn't enough of a priority, and nobody would not want it, right? If a quiet zone was free, we would all snap our fingers and have it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if it wasn't a priority for us, a year, 18 months ago, at 2 to 2.5, why it all of a sudden becomes the only reason for incremental dollars? And yes, the dollars come from a different source, but again, they still spend for the city the same way.
You know why? For me, it wasn't a priority to put in the CIP when we did the CIP because it was so much money. I'm like, how am I ever going to afford that? You know, and it's driving over old roads with big potholes seemed to be the priority for it, and so that's where it was one of those things. It was like the old days when we were trying to fill the vaults, man. It's like, how are we ever going to fill these vaults on State Street? It ain't going to happen. But then as IDOT came in and they wanted to remove the parking, and we pushed back and says, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that. We went back and forth. In the end, IDOT's like, you know what, let's tear it all up and we'll fill the vaults. It's like, hot dog, man. Let's make it happen, baby. I didn't put him in there in the first place because it was like one of those projects that was so overwhelming. It's like, I don't even know how to do it. When we found an opportunity to do it, took advantage of it. So in this case, you know, forgive me, because maybe sometimes I'm not clear. So when it came to why did I throw a quiet zone at this thing? Because it has always been one of those projects that I would like to see done, A, for the residents, and B, for the development of the downtown. You go down to the Burlington Northern Tracks through Downers Grove, Hinsdale, the trains are quiet when they go through there. They don't blare their horns, and that's why it's one of the reasons they have successful downtowns. It's livable. You know, you can eat outside. You can do those things without getting your head blown off when you're sitting outside at the Public Landing restaurant. So
safety is a big part of that, too. It's not something we talk about when we're talking about quiet zones, but in order to get those quiet zone statuses, you have to make all these improvements for safety. So it also does add some quality of life in the culture of the town, where not only are they more quiet coming through, but it's much safer for the pedestrians. And as we build out downtown and we get hopefully microbrewers and restaurants continue to flourish here, you're going to have more pedestrian traffic. And right now, we have no safety enhancements for the pedestrian crossings right now.
Yeah, and even when I talk to, I've had the opportunity now to bring some big development guys out here. I was driving one through town 2 months ago, and showing him the highway, I was showing him everything, I was showing him what we're doing downtown. And to my surprise, he's like, keep doing what you're doing downtown. He goes, you polish this up, man, and that stuff will follow. He goes, I'm telling you, I've been doing this in Chicagoland my whole life. And so continuing to take advantage of things like when the IDOT project came through, maybe getting the quiet zone done, there's a method to the madness. It's not just because it's like pulling it out of my keister. It's because it's like I'm trying to keep polishing up that downtown so that we can turn it into, so it can affect the entire city for good. So it was just taking advantage of an opportunity, Jason. That's all this really was. So That's kind of been my mindset behind this whole thing.
So I don't want to belabor the point anymore. I agree. I appreciate the creative approach you've had. I think, I don't speak for anybody else, but the approach to downtown has been refreshing and a good one. My preference would be to have that as, if we did something, for it to be unencumbered capital and then figure out how we want to spend it. But it's just my preference.
That's okay, but we're gonna have to be real clear with that when we bring folks in here from the west side and say, listen, man, where are we at? Are we doing this so that the west side can benefit with quiet zone? Or, hey, this money might go elsewhere. I want to be clear where my stance is, and that I'd actually like to be very clear up front with those folks. I don't want them to be surprised later. And we need to be very clear whether we're gonna do it one way or the other way.
Well, we also have to understand here, the quiet zone isn't just Sixth Street. It isn't just Second Street. It's from about a half a mile north,
From
Second Street.
Deep inside the
all the
Chevron
way-
Business
all the
Park,
way
all the way down
down,
to Delwood.
And could include that pedestrian walkway along the I&M Canal down there by Delwood Park West. It isn't just the west side. It is the entire downtown.
Okay.
But does the quiet zone include the 2 sets of tracks, right?
Yeah, it
Okay,
does.
I want to be clear on that.
Both
Okay.
CN and BNSF.
Okay, good. I have a little bit to add about.
And I've only been throwing that bigger number out because everything costs more than you think it. I know that the number's been 2.5, but that's why we've had HR Green on this. I want to really know what the number is. I don't want any surprises.
One of the things that we pointed out to HR Green on Monday was, in the original study we had, I don't know, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, whenever it was, the intersection at Old 9th Street, underneath the bridge was not included. The BNSF was not included, which automatically increases the cost. And it just literally was, as I'm flipping through this, and I said, well, we're missing an intersection. So,
Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad you caught that.
I wanted to bring a little bit up about the Commerce Street. I mean, we talked about that. I'm glad you brought that up. A few years ago, we toured the Orland Park Police Station, and their parking lot is in such a way that it takes the drainage from the parking lot and absorbs it in the ground because of, I'm going to call them pavers, but I'm not sure the technical name for them, but
Permeable pavers.
Permeable pavers.
there you go. Okay. Easy for you to say. And
pavers.
And so the water absorbs through the pavers. And at one time, we had talked about doing that for our Commerce Street. The water to go down, watershed, and be absorbed in that
We
way.
actually, Amy had actually filed for a grant with the state of Illinois
That's what I was
for
gonna
that
bring
very
up.
purpose, but they've kind of, well, we never heard anything for a long time, and then B, we did kind of hear from them again last year and said, oh, well, hey, are you still interested in doing this? And we're like, yeah, if it's like 80-20, sure.
Right.
But then since the Rauner administration took over, all those grants have kind of gone
Right.
dormant again, and so potentially, do you wait a few more years? I don't think we're ever going to get anything out of it.
Right.
So,
But
it's much more expensive for us to do that than asphalt on our own. But
Yeah.
if it was 80% funded by the state, I think we would certainly consider it.
What I want to bring up, my point is that we did talked about that a few years ago back. I don't remember how, but it's been a few years ago, that we had talked about doing that anyway. But again, I guess it was just thrown in, thinking we were going to get this grant. But there was some grant that we did apply for, did not go through. So.
And I would say this about Commerce Street, folks, is that either we do it next year or we don't worry about it right away. Because either it's going to serve its purpose to help the
Otherwise,
businesses that are all behind there get through the 2017 construction period, or it's not. If we do it at the same time as this 2017 construction, it's going to make it worse. And if 2017 is done and the street is put back together and it's fantastic, the priority of having Commerce Street's not all that important right now. So
I think it has
I think
more
either we do it
priority
next
than-
year or we don't do it at all. That's a decision to make.
And I don't know, maybe I need to talk, is there any utilities underneath that street that, so if we're going to redo that, I think we need to know whether we're going to do any utility work.
There's also
upgrade.
some guardrails there that should probably be replaced along the rail line.
Yeah, so
it would be
I think
more
just doing the
pedestrian
street
friendly.
maybe takes a little thought. I don't know if you probably did, I don't know, Amy, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if there's utilities there too, do we upgrade those too, so? So doing that street or that project may not be just a street, I guess, is what we're saying, right? I mean.
Yeah, and you know, I don't want to be stupid. I don't want to put a good surface on there only to know that we got to tear it up in 3 years. So that's something to think about too. So as we talk next week, Amy, let's make sure that's all ironed out.
You could certainly push Division Street's resurfacing off. That'll gain you $140,000 to $160,000 to put towards any additional improvements, maybe if Commerce is deemed to be the more important thing for this year, for 2016. And you could do Division in 17, 18, or whenever it's deemed appropriate in resurfacing projects of the CIP. We certainly defer to the council
Yeah.
on this one. It was
And
just,
maybe if Amy looks at that, we can get a better number wise or something.
yeah, and if Steve meets with her before the next budget thing, I mean, that's why it is called out separately, and this is certainly a healthy discussion, thank you.
Just so you know, Mayor, the meeting that we had today, that discussion did come up in terms of CIP, how many projects we're doing, where we're doing, and some of the concerns were, some of the streets just had to happen before they just started getting worse. Other ones were there, because I asked the same question. I'm like, if we're doing so much, can we back off on some, one or two? So when you do have that discussion, I mean, I know there are some concerns there about keeping those. And the other thing I wanted to say about the budget, this is my first budget with the city. I thought it was very clean and very clear and everything. The big thing for me was, on the old budget, we always kind of said, well, here's a project, it was budgeted, that means it's a go anyways, because it was in the budget. But now going through the process, understanding that just because it's budgeted doesn't mean it's an approved project, it's still a council thing. So it's really helping me understand that it's not just an automatic goal. We've got the money, spend it and everything. We still have to look at it and see what those overtures are.
Well, like Ben has said many times, the CIP's meant to be flexible because, again, you open up a road, you don't know what's going to come out. And so there has to be some flexibility in it.
Yeah, we plan for these appropriations, that's why we have these different line items and things. Certainly things can change, and all the big tag items are all pretty much brought back to the council for a decision and vote later in the year anyway. You have to appropriate them if you're ever going to have the option to actually spend it, so that's why we try to plan. But for example, we can have this continued discussion on the Commerce and Division and decide whether you want that to stay in there or not, or one or the other. It's all part of the process.
Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. Lisa, very good job. Thank you. Council, thank you for the discussion. Jason, thanks for your hard work on this. I know you look very carefully at this, and I appreciate your expertise. So, all right, everyone. We'll continue to have this discussion in the next week or two. All right. Any new business?
We have one more
Pam.
slide.
One more.
Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. The permit stuff. Yes, Pam, please.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I have a question for Chris. Are you leaving for this evening?
That was not me sneaking out.
I was gonna wait for new business, which is the next thing after this discussion.
He almost snuck out.
All right.
Way to catch him there.
Sorry, Pam. Go ahead.
That's okay. At the September 2nd Committee of the Whole meeting, staff had advised the council that the resolution which allows for the 50% reduction in certain permit fees was due to expire on November 6th. The program has been in place for about 24 months. As we were having the discussion, there were several issues that had come up. The first being that there needed to be some clarification on which fees are actually subject to this reduction. So I've identified in the report that it's the following municipal-only impact fees that are included in this reduction. And they include our tap-on fees for both sewer and water, our municipal facilities and equipment impact fee, ESDA, police protection in vehicles, street maintenance in vehicles, infrastructure fee, and a road impact fee, which, depending upon the magnitude of the roadway improvements that would be required either to an arterial or a collector, whatever a developer would pay would become a credit to what they've expended in making those improvements. What I want to remind the council is that this does not include school, park, library, or fire district fees, and it does not include any plan review fees that would be associated with the development. And the reason why I can't just outline what those are is because they vary depending on the size of the home, the number of bedrooms, etc. So for a single-family detached dwelling unit, the total municipal impact fees are $15,600. For a single-family attached, which would be your duplex or your townhome, the dwelling unit, per dwelling unit, is $14,100. Under our current 50% reduction program, those total municipal impact fees are reduced to $7,800 and $7,050 respectively. In addition, a comment came up about how many, generally about how many more residential units can be anticipated in Lockport. First of all, I put at your place early before the meeting this evening a map that says available residential land. There's a numbering system here along here, and then each of these numbers corresponds to the description of the residential subdivision that is currently entitled, but not necessarily active. So just looking at those numbers, in addition to some numbers that are remaining in Lago Vista, as well as some numbers that are remaining in, or are to be developed in Oak Creek and Creekside, just on that alone, we have about a little over 2,000 single-family detached and single-family attached units that are currently entitled. What that number does not include is an additional 659 multifamily units that are also entitled. In addition to that, these are also currently all subject to some form of an annexation agreement. In these agreements, in the majority of them, with the exception of maybe two, a negotiated and/or reduced impact fee structure has been established. Second, I did a rough estimate on how many acres are left that could be developed residentially. Roughly 600 acres, and this number, please note, also includes less than the 28%, which accounts for roads and infrastructure. So the number's actually, the total acreage is actually higher, but I have to back out that because obviously you can't build on that. What I used was the standard R1 lot size, which is 9,000 square feet, which is the majority of which the community is developed. And then I looked at the R2 single-family residential for the townhome and duplex development and used that, that lot ratio, which I think is like 4,500 square feet per unit. So again, with a rough estimate of that, there are approximately 2,800 additional residential units. Now that number is about a third single-family attached and 2/3 single-family detached. Now those properties are highlighted on this map that I gave you with the pink hatching. Okay, now that's assuming, I mean, we could have more units, we could have less units, until we start looking at those properties and see what the topography and conditions are, those numbers can fluctuate. But for all intents and purposes, we're going to say 2,800. It is likely that over the next few years, that when the city experiences its residential growth, it's going to be through a combination of both property to be annexed and currently entitled property. And I say that because right now with the development of Panantoni and the other interest of Hillwood to the east of there has been a lot of inquiries along that 163rd Street corridor, both on the north side and the south side, of interested potential developers. And a lot of that is a result of MI Homes starting construction. So it's kind of like the McDonald's Burger King concept. If one comes and can be successful, others feel that they can do the same. But something to keep in mind is that through these properties that still would remain to be annexed, the city it's been common practice for the city, as I outlined earlier, to negotiate the impact fees during those discussions. In addition to even amended annexation agreements when they're brought forth, there's an opportunity to discuss how we would handle our fees. There was also some discussion on possibly extending the program but using a sliding scale, which would increase the impact fee structure throughout a designated time period as a means to hopefully incent developers to get a move on sooner rather than later in moving forward with a residential project. So I included in the staff report what a prorated municipal impact fee structure would look like if we started with the 50%, went to a 75, 90, and then 100% at the end of the period. Originally, if you recall, when this program was put into place, it was put into place because there was perceived imbalance between the permit fees being charged by the city relative to the number of homes being constructed and what similar fees that were being charged by our surrounding communities. And then, as we saw with the recession, there was a decline in the number of permits being issued. Even though the number of housing permits each year is one of the key pieces for retailers and restaurants and economic development, we really need to think about, with what we have, what there is additional, how we want to, take a look at this fee structure in the future. The housing market is rebounding, and as I stated, with MI Homes starting construction, we have been receiving additional inquiries. So this evening, staff is looking for direction from the council on how we should proceed with the current residential incentive program, and hopefully, be able to do that on November 4th, because it will expire on November 6th. Even though we have the discretion to still work with someone, I would just like to make sure, because of all the interest, that we actually have something in place.
And just so I understand some of the things you just talked about, right now, land that is currently entitled equals about 2,659 kind of living spaces. If these areas that have the hash marks, the possible future residential, could potentially make room for another 2,800. Is that correct? Okay, so if we were to quote-unquote fill the city up with pretty much everything that could be filled with housing, we'd be looking at about 5,460 homes or units, right? Okay. Now, just so we're clear, I'm not advocating let's rush out and do that by any means. I'm just, when we talked about this last time, I'm like, what's the goal here? Is it to, do that or not? I mean, obviously, there's a whole ton of other things that come with, 5,500 new homes. And even if years before that could potentially happen. But still, that's the kind of thing that, these are numbers that the schools, of course, are interested in. This is what, we justify, all kind of things coming off of it, or know that that's what leads to it. As far as us goes, my purpose, I'm just kind of restating things we talked about last time, with lowering tap-on fees was to be competitive so we could turn those numbers around so that when we go to the ICSC conference, when I go to the retail conferences, I could tell them, yes, our housing starts are on the right track. I'm telling you, that's all they care about. And just so just some background as we make this decision. I know everybody thinks, like, why in the world can't we get that 355 developed, right? It's a flipping gold mine. They should be paying us to come here, right? All that kind of talk. We've heard it for years, right? It's still the rub. It's not the intersection. There's intersections 300 miles downstate in the middle of nowhere. They're not building there. It's not the intersection. It's the people. How many people live here? That's what they care about. And our trade area is still a bit of a dark hole. The trade area is about 95,000. The magic number is 110,000 and up, right? That's why they keep building things in urban downtown Chicago, because the retailers only want low-hanging shore fruit, right? These things, we're starting to get them on board, but I really got to coax, and you got to sweet talk, and you got to tell them how great it is, beyond, I know we're a little under, but where housing starts are moving forward, and we're doing the right thing, and so it does make a difference. But it doesn't mean that, I'm just doing this. The housing start lowered tap-on fee wasn't about getting more homes. It was about trying to make sure that we have talking points when we're talking for economic development for the stuff that we're all wanting, which is some of the retail, because we certainly are underserved there. So whether we extend this or cut it off or do incrementals, I mean, that's all stuff for us to talk about right now, but just to reiterate, that's been my, that's why we kind of directed this the way we did over the last number of years, so.
Well, some of the things too, I think, if I recall, the reason we had this too was to help spur the finishing development of some of the subdivisions that were started and kind of lagged behind a little bit in the subdivisions. So I think that was one of the things that plays into that too, along with, I think we're trying to be competitive to other communities in the neighborhood, and I'm not sure where that's at right now with the other communities, but again, we don't have to, base our decision on what the other communities are doing. So let's make that clear. If we should do what we want to do, but I know at the time when we talked about that, that was a talking point too, is to be competitive in that market, but.
And only because it's like, how come New Lenox gets a Buffalo Wild Wings and we don't, right? It's like, okay, well, let's get our housing starts up, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the competitive was not so we can be competitive with house building, so we can be competitive for the retail that we're looking for.
Right. So, I mean, again, I think every community has their own talking points to this, so, I guess I'm kind of undecided on this, whether if we change it or leave it. I guess I'm a little torn. I'm not 100% like satisfied either way, and I could go either way. I know we could use the funding, let's face it, right? I mean, we got a lot of things that we need repairing on, and this is an excellent way to get some money. I guess I would like to know, is it really a decision factor that the homes are built because of this? I mean, what is the true factor? Are they coming here for the schools? Are they coming here for our community in general? Is it really just because the fees are reduced? So with that being said, I'm thinking, hey, maybe we should go back, and get the revenue that we need. But on the turn, I don't know if there's some facts that state that this stuff does help our community to move forward, then I could support that too. So I guess I'm kind of looking for some dialogue too from everybody else and share their feelings on it. But at this time, I could go either way, maybe.
Brian?
But yes.
If I could just put my 2 cents in, impact fees and doing a lower to attract the builders, I think that's the way we still need to go. I mean, although the housing market is starting to move and, we have our new subdivision coming up and so forth, I think we still need to be competitive because other villages are still, I don't know what kind of incentives they have. I have not investigated, but perhaps, we could find out. But I think we still do need to have something, some kind of incentive for these builders to come in. I don't think we're there yet, that we can say, you know what, we don't have to do it anymore. They're, knocking down our doors. They're not doing that yet. We're just beginning to that growth that we're looking for. So in my opinion, I think we still need to have some kind of incentive.
I'd like to say, first of all, Pam, great work on this. This is really impressive. And this was a lot of the information that I wanted to see when we talked about this. So thank you for that. A couple of things to note. One, I think that I agree with Alderwoman Bartleson that I don't know if we're quite there yet with saying that, maybe we don't need incentives. I'm not sure if our housing starts are there yet where trying to track these developments, the commercial, the retail, that they're saying, yeah, you guys, this is where we want our housing starts to be. But I think that, if you look at this list that Pam got for us, these are all developments, and are these going to be under PUDs, most of these? I mean, I think maybe that's something that we could consider when we write that PUD. I mean, I don't think that this is an overall ordinance that we need to put in effect now, but that can be worked out when a developer comes here to say, hey, we're willing to work with you on the impact fees.
And that's a good point. And the ones that are on this map, they already have binding annexation agreements that reduce the fee structure. So
Okay.
they're in place for the
go.
next X number of years. But you're right on when if you focus that discussion more onto the hatched areas. I mean, those properties will all have to come in with an annexation agreement.
Right.
And as I stated, with an annexation agreement, you can pretty much negotiate and discuss anything. So if at the time someone comes in to annex, they will, if they ask, I want reduced fees, similar to what we did with Sagebrook on the renegotiation of that annexation agreement, it will be brought before the council. Staff will provide you with the information that you need, and you can decide then on a case-by-case basis whether or not we still should be in a position of reducing the impact fees, whether, for a couple years or a few years in that annexation agreement. So there will be opportunities to still have these discussions. So, from a staff opinion, I'm kind of like you, Ryan. It's like not really sure if it really incentivized the development that has happened, or whether or not it was just kind of coordinated with respect to when it was going on. But given the fact that we have other opportunities to negotiate and discuss this, having something on the books or not, I don't necessarily know that's going to make a difference. It does from the standpoint of being able to say we have that on the books, but if we also say that we have in the past considered reduced fees when we talk to the development community, that can also be another way of saying we're development friendly and we want to work with you.
All right, what else? I want to hear everybody's thoughts.
If I can add to that, the one thing that's the difficult part of this whole thing is that construction costs and building costs have not gone down. In architecture, we know that. None of our projects have come in cheaper. Nothing's coming in cheaper. Even through the recession, prices were still the prices. Wood was still going up. Copper was still going up. We're taking it upon ourselves to say we'll squeeze our portion, but nobody's squeezing their portion. Nobody's building it cheaper. Nobody's cutting their percentages on some of those things. They're trying to, developers are working with it just to sell a little bit better. That's out there. But with those annexation agreements, the tough thing for me is that you're locking it in place for 20 years. As much as we could sit there and say, yeah, okay, just do the 50% and it's good, we want Sagebrook in or whoever it is in there, those are the fees that we're going to have to live with for 20 years. So we're hoping he's done in 2 years, 3 years, but some developments may take 10. There's Bob's that still is how many years, and they're still not developed, and we don't have, sidewalks and so forth. So if we don't accommodate for that, or if we don't accommodate a sliding fee scale that it falls off, these impact fees that fall off after a couple of years, we have to be cognizant of that. I applaud Pam putting together the prorated municipal impact fees, because it's okay to sit there and it is an incentive to sit there and say, start building in Lockport before anybody else. Everybody's at 50%. We're going to start increasing ours, so build here now. Do that type of thing. I was debating on saying, okay, that 50% maybe goes to the end of this year and we just do a fiscal year. And maybe that's too soon of a time period to say, let's go to that 75%. So maybe 2016 was actually up to 60%. So you kind of gave everyone a warning, and then it went up. Three-year program to get this back up to normal. We can always change it later, but it's at least a plan for us to do this. And then when developers come in 2016, 2017, we have a baseline that we can negotiate. But the biggest thing is that we have to negotiate that an annexation agreement that this incentive has to come off, or else it's locked in there for 20 years. And if somebody's sitting there, we may be 20 years down the road where $7,800 will not cover anything for what we're doing. So that's the biggest thing that we're doing there. I think a sliding fee scale that we have this now, even if it starts at 75% next year or 60, to be the first step is a small increment to kind of get the word out, or 75%, that's up for us to decide. But the annexation agreements definitely have to have that tail off, even if that's extended to a 5-year program, or I probably wouldn't go more than 5 years. 10 years is really pushing it, because construction costs are going up by 2 to 3% every year. We're behind the times on our impact fees, on everything that's there. We can't control those items. Nobody's really helping us on those portions. So we're just kind of staying in time with everything.
Okay, those good thoughts. What else? Anybody else? I think it's a great suggestion, Jim. I mean, if it ends up being, especially for bigger projects, and as we renegotiate stuff, it's like, look, if this is the percentage that you guys want, that's fine. But if you don't get your houses built within 5 years, it's going up. So it's not forever. I think that's a great idea. And also maybe returning even our 50%, start putting it out there that, by the end of 20, I'm not putting real numbers out here, I'm just going along with the idea. If at the end of 2016, it goes to 75% at the end of 2018, it's, you know, whatever. I mean, perhaps that's another way of doing it to get people to understand that, like, look, if you want this reduced rate in Lockport, you got to get on a shtick this year, this coming year. So maybe having a sliding scale.
Yeah, I agree with the sliding scale. You probably have to give it like one extra year, right? Because if you're going to incentivize somebody to come this year, in 16, they're not also probably going to have much built in 16, right?
Yeah.
So
But I'm assuming the people that know are,
that's
I
true.
mean, they're losing 10%. If you just went that next step, say a small step right there to kind of just say, we're kind of keeping up with CPI, even though it's nothing, but we're being honest about it, and we are going to raise it, and that's the first step. And all the Creekside, Sagebrooks, Oak Creek, everybody kind of gets, oh, absolutely, you know, if they don't have annexation agreements, the word gets out, and then they start, you know, getting people out there. It's definitely just a direction to move forward with, because we can't stay at 50% forever. We can't do that. We've got 2,500 homes there. We do have to get to a certain level to get more retail, but we're not going from 50% to 100%. We're taking those steps and giving people enough warning.
Okay. I'm very open to a sliding scale. Instead of us just throwing numbers out on the table, Pam, maybe that's something that you could look at for us and come up with like the right idea, like maybe it's 75% by the end of 2016. Come up with something that makes sense that we can then consider.
Do you want me to put in I went from 50 to 75, but do you want me to do a 50 to 60?
Well, like I said, instead of us all throwing numbers at you, because, you know, I'm a graphic designer, Darren's a chiropractor, you know, maybe we just have some professional kind of.
Well, we do have to give her an end. We do have to give her an end year. I mean, we can't.
No, that's fine. I'm thinking, I'm saying instead of us just throwing 50%, no, 65%, do I hear 75%?
Yeah, but she can't put together something on a 20-year scale or a 5, I mean.
4 years or 3 more years?
I would say if we're back at 100% within 3 years, I think that sends a message. So how we increment that up over the next 3 years.
I agree.
And we're able
I'm
to
good with
change
that.
that if we need to?
Yeah.
Would we be able
Sure.
to change that if we need to?
Yeah, of course.
Because, I mean, just
No
in case,
PUDs
I mean, you know, I don't want it to come out as though, you know, this is set in stone and then we can't change it, you know, because sometimes you do have to still bend a little bit.
Well, and some of the bending can come in with, let's say there's, you know, there's two things that are going on. You got the pockets of homes that need to get built, right? Here and there's a schmattering. These kind of incremental things would affect them mostly. When it comes to, like we said earlier, somebody comes in and like, hey, look, I want to annex this chunk of land and I want to do it and it has a PUD and there's more room for negotiation, I think you can bend a little bit. Maybe it is, okay, we'll give you 50%, but if you don't have X amount of homes, there's a timeline.
Right.
Your subdivision, you're going to start paying more if you don't get your homes built within 2 years, 3 years. You got a time limit, so that helps motivate them.
And that's logical. I mean, you know, that sounds
Right.
good.
I think to help Pam, when does this program end? November?
November 6th.
Can we all kind of agree that maybe we keep the 50% at least till the end of the year, so we're.
Yeah, I don't have a problem extending it through the end of the year, but I think as we look at 2016, 2017, 2018, that 3-year period, just find what you think is good numbers for us to increment that back up again. And I think, yes, that helps get the message out there to the builders. It's like, hey, look, yeah, we don't know that you heard that the tap-on fees went down. Get it in gear if you want to do something, because it's not going to last forever. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for your work on that, Pam.
Yeah, nice job, Pam.
I have a couple questions for Chris Ulm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for new business.
45 extra minutes.
From here till executive.
Yes, that would be good. Just Chris Ulm from Strand Engineering.
Thank you.
A couple of months ago, Chris was one of a few people that met with 2 representatives from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Illinois Geological Society, and Illinois Nature Preserve. Okay, so within our first question is, how are we doing with well number 14? Have we drilled it yet?
It is currently advertised for bids right now. Those bids are to be open October 30th.
Okay. And for those who can't keep the numbers straight, well number 14 is the new one, which is replacing well number 9 out there by Oak Prairie. So the second question is within our budget next year, we have $775,000 is allocated for well number 15. And May, June, or whatever, and when you were up here and we were talking about well siting, okay, which then led to this discussion that we had with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. One of my comments at that time was, it seemed to be, my recollection of the optimal well site from a couple years ago was in the off of Summit Street, in between whatever the Strawberry Hill subdivision and Lago Vista, over in that area, which of course fell within that 2-mile buffer area. Okay. What thought has Strand given to a potential site? If we go east, as far east as these alphabet agencies want us to, we have less water potential. So where are we with that?
We did gain approval from all the agencies for well 14
Yes.
for that site. We sent in a figure showing several potential well 15 sites, we'll call it. This included the well 235 site that, or the well
5-8 site.
5-8 site, Farrell Road tank site. That was one of the sites that was on that figure, and then there were several just areas, basically. If you recall, they said 355 corridor and further east is better. The further you get away from the seeps and the recharge areas, the better. So we just identified several areas of land, undeveloped areas over there, along that as well for their consideration. Nature Preserve has come back with an answer of we don't really see any reason to object these. It was kind of one of those vague vanilla answers, but so they kind of deferred to U.S. Fish and Wildlife for impacts to the recharge areas.
So when it comes to a potential well site, and I would personally like to go for the optimal site, which happens to be within this 2-mile buffer area, okay? And ask for permitting of that area first, and not give them any other options. Because if we give them this or that, well, then they're gonna go out east.
I understand that, Mike. Our concern with that is, though, there was a contamination.
No, I'm not
issue.
talking 5-8.
You're not talking that.
I'm not talking 5-8. I think, that it's gonna be a really hard sell to the public to go ahead and drill another well in an area where we know that in the past there was bacteria.
Oh, you're talking about the previous well 14 down at the, in the Fox.
It's off of Summit, wherever that was, over that area. It's within that. Well, reopening 5 and 8. Yeah, I'm not talking about that site. I'm a little bit further west.
That was one of the options.
Where are we going with this? We're going to be drilling another well next year. We have to get permitting. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Illinois Nature Preserve wants us to go as far east as we possibly can. Previous well sightings, the well sighting studies that we had tells us that is, the further we go east, it is less optimal for gallons per minute. Okay.
Not part of this agenda, so
That's why it's new business.
Well, it's pretty complicated, though. Do you want to put something on the agenda for next week where we can
Well, I
actually
just
look at
want-
stuff and read through it a little
Well,
bit?
this is why it's new business.
Okay. Well, maybe,
I'll try and give a concise answer to that, and I think that limiting ourselves to that one site or that one area, they have to do a lot of, they are going to now take on the study of that area, which is kind of undefined. By limiting us to that one area, I think that is going to draw out the duration. I think we can get quick approvals on the other areas that are already in the defined drainage
Well,
seep areas.
of course we will. Okay, but that's not the point. The point is that we have the optimal number, the best place to drill a well is not going to be the place where they're going to want us to drill it.
Well, one of the things that I asked Chris and Strand for a task order on recently is to give us an analysis of recommendations on where things are going over the next 3 to 5 years when it comes to water and sourcing it. So I think when he gets that component going, we can bring that back to the council and have those further discussions, and try to get some more consensus on what we can do. Some of it is not necessarily, directed by us. I mean, we're at the helm of, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife on some things. I think ultimately they will work with us. It's just a matter of they want us to stay as far away as the recharge zone as possible. And, part of Chris's job is to help mitigate the best benefit for us and the community and wherever that is, so.
Maybe I should call you.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks. And actually, thanks, Darren. Yeah, you've been doing a lot of work on this, and I appreciate it. And you've been everything from working with, U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the concerns about maybe we can't drill because of, emerald ash or rather, no, emerald dragonfly, rather. I appreciate all the work you've been doing on it. So while I make fun of you, I respect you. All right, anything else? Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
All right, JR, seconded by Mr. Capadona. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, you guys want to take 2, 5? You want to mosey? I think it's a pretty quick. 2. You got 2. No. All right. Did it take 5? Let's start promptly at 9:05.
I don't know.
Do you? Yeah.
It's the vote.
All right, we're going to mosey along here. City Council, can we have a roll call, Alice?
Yes. Petracos?
Here.
Capadona?
Here.
Delogly?
Here.
Smith?
Here?
Deskin? Here. Vandermeer? Here. Coretta?
Here.
Bartleson? Here. 8 present.
All right, can I have a motion to have a consent agenda?
So moved?
Second?
All right, that was Peretta, Bartleson. All right, so what we got on here, or all in favor?
Aye.
What we have here tonight is the regular city council meeting minutes from October 7th, committee of the whole meeting minutes from October 7th. We have our payroll ending October 11th, approval of various bills. There was the PZZ case 2015-011. There was ordinance number 15026. There was Oak Creek unit letter of credit reduction, which was resolution 15080. And then we had the budget ordinance amendment, which was 15023. So can I have a motion to pass consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Alderman Capadona, seconded by Alderman Peretta. All in favor?
Aye.
Mayor,
Anna says we have to do a roll call on those.
Oh.
According to statute.
That's fine. Mr. Attorney Thanis texted that in. Yeah, man, his influence stretches. All right, let's do a roll call, please.
Yes.
Capadona?
Yes.
Delogly?
Attorney Tanis was supposed to get some information. I assume I'm supposed to say I approve yes to all consent agenda items except item 4, which is the approval of bills.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Smith?
Yes.
Deskin?
Yes.
Vandermeer?
Yes.
Coretta?
Yes.
Bartleson?
Yes.
8 yeas. Motion carried except for item 4 for Delogly.
Is this from now on, or just something special within this particular?
No, he said that according to the statute, he looked it up, that all,
All consents will be roll call.
consent has to be a roll call.
Okay, no problemo.
We have to retroactively vote on old.
Yes, Can we have a roll call for all the last 2 years?
We're gonna have a 7-hour meeting where we
Yeah.
just read down everything.
All right. Big Ben, what do you got?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The first item on the agenda is CA1. That's the, actually, we spoke about it a little bit earlier this evening, the real estate property exchange that we were proposing for downtown Lockport for the public property parking lot that we have behind Paradise Bay. Actually, since we've been kind of exploring the concepts of the quiet zone, we've realized that some of the improvements we may need to do there might have to utilize a couple of parking spaces in that parking lot. So we alerted the property owner that we wanted to put a table on this discussion just for probably one meeting and see if we can meet with him and let him know that this is where we're thinking, if we can get him to grant us a construction easement for these apparatuses. If they're approved and he signs off on that, we could bring it back to you as early as November 4th, maybe November 21st. If he does not, then it's going to be on hold, and maybe it's better for the city that we keep this parking lot that we were going to trade away.
Nope.
But
No,
we need a
understood.
little more time to kind of, and that just literally came up last week, you know, luckily that we didn't realize that until last minute. So
No,
we
I
did
agree.
apologize to him, and
So we'll need a motion.
So I make the motion to table this discussion until,
I'm thinking 11/4, and then let's,
Till
we should get an
November 4th,
answer by then whether
November
he's going to
4th,
work with us or not,
2015,
and then we can come up
city
with a
council
longer
meeting.
term. Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay. So that's Deskin, Smith, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. An executive session requests?
Yes, thank you. That was 2C1 for personnel appointments, compensation, discipline, or dismissal.
Okay. Very good. Pam, what do you got?
Yes, this is the second piece to our whole fee discussion. Also back on September 2nd, at the Committee of the Whole, staff advised council that the resolution which allowed for the continuation of a delay in payment of school, park, and library district fees until final inspection or prior to occupancy was due to expire at the end of this year. We also further noted that extending the program or making the program permanent would not have a negative impact on any of the districts, since the true impact occurs after a resident has occupied that dwelling. Council agreed that we should change the code and make the program permanent and directed staff to place it on the consent agenda. However, after we went back and did further review of the language in previous resolutions, as well as the existing language in the development code, we felt that presenting this without sending some sort of notification to the respective districts would not be a good idea. We wanted to make sure they were aware of it. City Administrator Benson, on September 9th, did send out courtesy notices to the Park District, all the school districts, and the library districts. He did receive some phone calls, but they were primarily with just questions for clarification. However, none of the districts objected to us extending this program. So there are 3 sections in the development code that will need to be amended, which is what has been presented in the staff report this evening. The first one relates to the Park District payment, and basically the language is just going to be changed from at the time the building permit is issued to prior to or concurrent with submission of the application for certificate of occupancy. And just so you can see what that looks like, I did include that as an attachment. And then there are 2 places in this language that it changes then the second part from building permit to certificate of occupancy. And same thing, school districts are number 2, and the same language will be replaced in that section of the code. Number 3 relates to the library district, and similarly, the same language will be replaced in that section of the code accordingly. So staff is asking for a motion to pass ordinance number 15-025, which amends the sections of the respective portions of the development code as it pertains to the timings of payment of impact fees to the Park District, school districts, and library districts.
I'll make that motion.
JR,
I second.
seconded by Alderwoman Bartleson. All in favor?
Aye.
Was there something, was there a question? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. All right, and passes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. New business, we're all good? All right, so we need to make a motion to go into executive session.
Make a motion?
Nobody want to do that one, yeah.
I'll second.
Joanne, seconded by Alderman Peretta. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's give it 5 to set things up, and we'll keep moving.